No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to right now. On this episode, I want to talk about integrity.
I think it's always a good time to talk about integrity.
Right. Integrity as a leader. You know, I heard a long time ago that integrity is what you do when no one is looking. And it's not wrong. But, you know, on Hacking Leadership podcast, you know, we talk about things from an actual, you know, where the rubber meets the road standpoint. What does it actually mean? So what I do when no one is looking, okay, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I do when no one is looking that I'd be proud of doing. And every once in a while, there are some things that can happen that when no one's looking where I go, would I do this if people were looking? And the answer is no, right? So,
right.
but I consider myself to be a person of integrity. So I think that definition, while not inaccurate, is kind of short-sighted a little bit. You know, it's not all encompassing. So I want to talk about when it comes to leadership and when it comes to leading people, what does it mean to be a leader of integrity? Have you encountered any of this before with your people? Have you thought about, you know, whether or not your people have integrity, or do you strive to be a leader of integrity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's critical. I think that it's one of the things that is bucketed in the foundational pieces of like trust, you know, like doing the right thing. And I think sometimes the right thing is tough to say, because I think that the real integrity shows up in moments of either kind of like crisis to a degree,
sure,
or when there's a temptation to do the wrong thing because it's easier. Mm-hmm. Like, I think for me, like that's really what I see more of is like, did you do the right thing because you knew it was the right thing and you knew it would be more work or harder work, or did you take the easy route? And why did you take the easy route? And then are you willing to admit that you took the easy route? Like this is kind of more around how I look at measuring some elements of integrity amongst leaders and amongst teams.
Right. There's also an element of this too, whereas sometimes those things align. Sometimes the easy thing, the thing that benefits you, the thing that is the most desirable outcome for you is the right thing. And I think sometimes we get caught up in this. I think I've seen leaders kind of go out of their way to almost hurt themselves because they want to seem like they're taking altruism to a fault. You know, like they want to show that their integrity, that they're a leader of integrity, and that they have integrity, and they feel like, oh, if I make this decision because it benefits me, I won't be seen as a person of integrity. But if the decision benefits everybody and it's the right decision to be made, then you should make that decision, right? This is when there's a competition here. There's two different agendas that are competing, and you have to decide what is the right one. Well, the one that is in service of your people and your values is the right decision. Again, if it aligns with what's best for you, great. If it doesn't, this is when integrity comes into play. And I think, you know, when it comes to actually doing the things, taking the actions that would lead people to say, oh, Lorenzo is a leader of integrity, Chris is a leader with integrity. Some of the things that actually means, you know, not as nuanced as what you do when no one's looking, is things that you do when it comes to following through. Like, do you make a commitment and then follow through with it? Or do you go to the person you made the commitment to and say, you know what? I can't meet this commitment, and here's why. I don't think many people who are at least decent leaders, they make commitments, and in their mind they're thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to meet this, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's not where the problem happens. The problem happens when you say that and you truly mean that you're going to do it, then circumstances change, you can't do it, and you hope it goes away, or that they don't know that you weren't able to meet that commitment, or you hope beyond all hope that you're going to be able to make it happen anyway, even though you know in your heart it's not going to happen, and you try to you kill yourself making it happen, you know, because you're trying to, you know, follow through on the commitment, even though you're not going to be able to anyway. This is when integrity comes into play. Instead of just, you know, going to the person, owning it, and making plans, people don't hold you accountable to a failed commitment if it doesn't happen very often. They hold you accountable to your lack of acknowledgement of the failed commitment and your lack of efforts to try to rectify the situation or make it better. That's kind of like the first thing I think of. What do you have?
I agree with that as well. I think, integrity, I think, is one of those things as well where are you allowing people to be authentically themselves, and then are you supporting them in a way that's unique to what they need? Like, do you have the understanding that people see the world differently, that people experience the world differently, that when somebody comes to you with a genuine concern, are you in the moment with them and listening and learning from what it is and having kind of an open mind to the conversation or the dialogue? I think that's such an important part because, it's similar to when I talk about like development versus training. Like training is an action of helping somebody get better at something through, kind of giving them information, allowing them to practice, whatever that might be. Development is more of a feeling. As far as like, I feel like I'm getting development. Like I could say to you, I know that you are, and you've read these things, or you've done this thing, and you've gotten better at this, or that you've passed this test or whatever. But for me, really, development is that feeling. And I feel the same way about integrity. Is like integrity is this feeling of when you go to somebody, that they're going to be consistent, that they're going to be open to the conversation, that they're going to own things if they make a mistake, that they're going to be authentic and honest with you. Like these are things that I think are critical when it comes to the idea of integrity. Like you and I are talking. Like if I see somebody and say, okay, I think they have integrity, that has to come from experience that I've had with that person, not that somebody told me Chris has only ever made really great decisions and Chris is authentic and Chris is a great, like, okay, I'll take your thoughts on that. That's good to hear, but I'm going to judge how I think about your integrity based upon what you were talking a little bit about earlier, which is my experience with you. What are you doing? How are you following up? How are you showing up for me in a space where I might need you to show up for me that way?
Right. I think where this also kind of where you can tell whether or not a person has integrity is when it comes to feedback. Meaning if you're giving a leader feedback and they are defensive about it, even if they're doing their best to make it seem like they're not defensive about it, if they are anything other than completely open and listening to what you have to say when it comes to feedback, and even if you're wrong, meaning I've given a leader feedback before where when I was saying the feedback, I was sure I was right. And I found out later that I was incorrect in terms of my assumptions about the situation, but the leader still wasn't defensive about it. The leader still wasn't, in a hurry to make sure I knew that I was wrong. They took my feedback to heart and they validated what I was saying, not saying that I was right, but saying that I was right to say it. Because if I was saying it in the moment, it means that whatever limited information I had led me to believe this, and because I wouldn't have just made it up. So they knew that, and they acknowledged it from a standpoint of, okay, Chris is giving me this feedback because of the limited information he has. We'll get to the rest of the information later, but right now I want to validate that the next time there's feedback to be given, that Chris doesn't hesitate to give it. And so I'm going to validate that feedback in the moment. That is a really difficult thing to do for a lot of leaders, especially when you know that you're right. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is have you ever been in a situation where you were getting feedback from somebody and you wanted to kind of maintain the relationship? You knew it was important to because you wanted to make sure the person felt they could give you feedback, but in your mind, you knew this person was wrong, that the feedback was inaccurate about you. But again, the relationship was more important and you had to deal with that on a different time. I want to ask you that, but first I want to get a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, when was the time you had to kind of take some feedback from somebody and you knew it was wrong, but you knew that the importance of coming off as a leader with integrity who isn't defensive about getting feedback, but who takes it and moves forward with it because that was the impression of the person at the time. That was the important part.
Yeah, I remember it clear as day, and it was in Costa Mesa, California, many, many years ago. And there was a situation where there was a customer issue where a customer was relatively upset and was raising their voices and this type of thing. And I had a leader who had to deal with it and felt very strongly that that customer should be asked to leave. And again, we're not talking about physical violence. We're not talking about direct name calling, anything like that at all. Just upset and loud because they're upset about what had happened. And after I had to go figure out what was going on, and I had to step to the customer, step to kind of one of those situations in leadership where you jump into the middle of a situation, you have no idea what's happening. You just know that you've got two very upset people. And I had to separate the two of them. And the first one I got to was the customer, because in my mind, I wanted to de-escalate and be very clear about what type of behavior is acceptable or not acceptable in our store, regardless of whatever's going on. But through the dialogue of understanding, we really had messed something up. Like, we had done something that was not good, and they lost a lot of information and data. It was 100% our mistake, right? So we needed to own it. But the leader that was dealing with it was upset with me and gave me feedback about my decision to allow the customer to stay there and to work through what was going on. And again, we all know, if you've dealt with customer service, like, these can be really big gray areas, but gave me feedback. And this is a leader that I had a great relationship with, that I trusted. They trusted me, and they were really upset by my decision to have the customer stay there. And so what I had to do was just listen and take it and say, okay, like tell me, okay, and listen and say, I accept it, I understand it, would it be okay with you if we sit down, tomorrow, and just talk through this, right? So that I can better understand more of your frustration, that I can appropriately, share my perspective of what I saw without making any excuses, but that I can also own as a leader, like, what I may have done wrong that would make you feel this way about the interaction. And they agreed, and I kind of felt like, let's calm that down and we'll talk the next day. And then we had the conversation again. And for me, a big part of that was just listening, and then sharing and being really clear about my intentions of that was not what I intended to do. That was not what I wanted them to feel. This was a situation that I walked into, and this is kind of what I was being forced to make a decision upon in the short term. But that my intention is never to have that leader feel that way. And so what I learned from that, and I said what I committed to, is that in those interactions where it's not something where I immediately, I don't see or hear something that requires an immediate dismissal, I'm going to park a customer off to the side, and I would go and talk to the employee just to better understand, kind of, talk to her or as a leader, like, just to better understand her perspective on what was going on. But also allowing her to understand that we are obligated to also keep our composure as leaders. So it was those moments where I did not agree at all with the feedback, because I know that this was the right decision to make based upon all things considered. And I felt that some of her anger was actually a projection of her frustration by the fact that her and the team had done something that really was causing this issue. And then when the customer became upset, they kind of saw an out to kind of make this about the customer being mad and not about the fact that we made a pretty big mistake.
Right. And I don't want to imply that one relationship is not important and the other is. But at the end of the day, the relationship with your direct reports, especially if you're a leader of leaders, the relationship that you have with them, honestly, it is more important than the relationship with any individual one client or customer, because you're talking about the entire future of what you and these people can do together. Whereas, customers can come and go, and it's more important than that. But it does not rise to the level of the importance of the relationship between you and your direct reports. And so that's great. Putting it off to the next day can allow people to kind of approach it from a different standpoint when the emotion of the situation is over. It's very, very difficult to make emotionally sound decisions when you're in the middle of an emotionally heightened interaction. And just to kind of kick the can down the road a little bit sometimes is the appropriate thing to do. So I like that a lot. Did the employee eventually ever see your side of the story as far as why the customer wasn't kicked out, or was it kind of like an agree to disagree thing?
No, they did after some of the dialogue and the understanding, and it was a good it was a good leadership moment because this was a leader that was continuing her career and lessons, and it was a great moment to kind of share in real time the impact that a leader can have in those situations and the types of things that she would come across as she continued her career, and that these are not easy decisions. Sometimes they're immediate. You're trying to do the best that you can, but these are the moments that we learn the most. So she absolutely did, when she had the chance to kind of like reflect on it, talk about it, think about it, and then realize, not only where did we own what we needed to own as an organization, but how there's a way that her emotional elements of the conversation with the customer also elevated it to the point where I was left to have to make a decision quickly. Where if she had maintained elements of her composure, it would have been easier for her and I to just have that side-off conversation quickly there.
I like that it worked out, and I think that hopefully the lesson is that eventually she was going to be in a situation where she had to make the same kind of call, and that is probably the most important lesson of all of it, is that eventually she's going to be in the same situation and will not have the benefit of hindsight. She'll have to kind of make the decision in the moment. So that's good.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.